Jess from makeandocrew.com, and today we're going to use one pair of flip-flops and one skein of yarn to make lightweight summer slippers. So to get started, here's what we're going to need. One pair of flip-flops a size smaller than you normally wear, one skein of Lion Brand 24/7 cotton, a size B hook, a size G hook, the printable ruler guide that's part of the PDF of this pattern, or a measuring tape, scissors, a sharp tool to poke holes in your flip-flop soles, and some stitch markers. Okay, to get started we're going to snip the straps off of our flip-flop soles, and I'm doing this at a really extreme angle. And I found that this actually feels less noticeable than taking out the plugs, trimming them, and gluing them back in. So that's how I like to do it. But I do take this mid-toe one out, and then I'll trim it down and glue it back in at the end. So now that we have those off, we're ready to poke our holes. Okay, so to poke the holes, we're going to either use the printable ruler guide that's part of the PDF of this pattern, which you can buy for a couple dollars on my site, or you can use a measuring tape. This guide isn't essential, but it does help achieve the gauge, because if you notice here, the distance between the holes is going to dictate how close your stitches are together, and getting that right from the beginning is going to really help you have the right tension as you work around the sole. So for this example, we're going to use the ruler here, and I'm going to use my sharp tool to poke a hole through each of these dots. And I'm just going into the dot and coming out about 1/4 of an inch to 1/3 of an inch into the sole. And if you're not using the printable ruler here, you're using a measuring tape instead, you want your holes to be just slightly more than 1/4 of an inch apart. That's what's going to work well for the yarn and the gauge. So just a hair over 1/4 of an inch apart. And what I'm going to do is poke these holes all the way around the sole. And I'm just going slowly with this part because this is an area that if you're not careful you might poke a hole that rips through the sole, but I've found that as long as I'm going slowly I tend to have no trouble with this. So I'm just going to continue all the way around until I have holes poked all the way around the sole. Now it's time to attach our yarn. So I'm going to tie a slip knot here in the end of my yarn, and then I'm going to use my smallest hook. So for me that's a B, and we're going to insert that hook from the top to the bottom of the sole in the back hole, so whatever looks about the center of the heel. So I've put my hook carefully through there, and I'm going to grab this slip knot and then just carefully pull it back up so that the loop is on the top of the sole. And from here I'm going to grab this yarn and chain, sort of slip knot chain one to attach it to the sole. So now we've attached the yarn, it's stuck on there, and we can single crochet in each of these holes, kind of treating these like they're the top of a row of single crochet. So I'm going to put this tail underneath here so that we don't have to weave it in at the end. I'm just going to kind of crochet over it as I go. So I'm going to insert my hook from the bottom now to the top, grab the yarn. Sometimes it kind of takes twisting my hook around really to get a good handle on it, because the hook size is so small compared to the yarn we're using. And then I'm just going to complete a single crochet. Oops. Okay, so now I might tighten that slip knot down a little bit, but I'm just going to insert my hook just like a normal single crochet would be. Grab the yarn, pull it down, and then complete the single crochet. So as you can see, this part is just a little bit slow because we want to work carefully into these holes of the sole, but once it's done we're just going to have the regular normal V's of single crochet to work into, and it's going to be a lot easier. So I'm going to continue like this, slow and steady, all the way around the sole till I get back to where I started. Okay, I've single crocheted in each hole now around the sole, so to end round 1, I'm just going to slip stitch to join these together. So I'm going to go underneath my first single crochet as well as that tail we crocheted over, and I'm going to grab the yarn and then just pull it through the loop on my hook to slip stitch it together, and that can sometimes get a little bit loose there, so just pull that nice and tight. And now we've finished round 1 with a slip stitch. So we're all done with our smaller hook, and I'm going to switch to my size G hook, which is my larger hook. And from here we're going to start round 2, and to do that we're just going to single crochet in each stitch around. So we're going to work in sort of a spiral circular method, so I'm not chaining one at the beginning of each round, I'm just single crocheting basically around and around and around and around, and we're going to do that until we have 9 total rows of single crochet. So this first round counts as 1, and we're going to do 8 more around the sole. And it's important to note that we're working our stitches pretty tightly here. The hook is pretty small, and that's creating these nice small stitches that will be tight enough to give our shoe some structure when we walk, and it won't be too squishy or floppy when we wear it. So I'm just going to continue in single crochet here until I have 9 total rows of single crochet. As you work, it can be really helpful to reference the free written pattern for these slippers, which you can just find on my site makeandocrew.com, and it's right below this video here. And in that pattern you'll see everything that we talk about here, plus some more written details and some helpful step-by-step photos. Okay, we've come to the end of round 9 here, and I haven't marked my stitch because I kind of know what the first hole I've been working into was, but if you want, when you begin the section, feel free to put a stitch marker so that you know at the end of each round that you're starting a new one. So from here, what we're going to work on next is tapering the sides here so that you have a little bit of a lip to hold your heel in the shoe or slipper. So I've marked what we're going to call about 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock if we were thinking of our flip-flop like a clock. So I see right about in the middle of the sole here, this is like 3 and 9 o'clock. So a little bit down from there, that's where we're going to be working this heel taper section. So in the written pattern, we're calling this was just round 9, and we're going to call this round 9 continued because we're going to work just this little section right here. And I'm going to single crochet in each stitch until the marked stitch. So once I reach the marked stitch here, I am going to slip stitch into the marked stitch, and that's just going to cause this edge to taper a little bit. So I'm going to slip stitch that, and now it's time to turn, and for the first time we're going to work row 10 working back toward the other marker. So I'm turning this around here, and I kind of like to keep my yarn on the front side for this just so that it doesn't get in the way and make this look a little bit messy. So I'm going to hold it in front of my hook, but from here I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to skip that slip stitch right there. We're just going to work right over that, skip that, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the next single crochet. So after I've done that slip stitch, I'm going to just single crochet in each stitch until I get back to the other marker, and I'm going to stop at the marked stitch. Okay, as I've come to the end of row 10 here, I'm going to slip stitch into the marked stitch. And then I'm going to turn my work again, keeping the yarn toward the inside of the shoe here, and I'm going to chain 1 and skip that slip stitch that we just did. It's kind of small right there, and instead I'm just going to work into the next stitch where I'm going to slip stitch there as well, and that's going to create a taper that's similar to the other side here. So for row 11, I'm going to single crochet in each one of these stitches until there's 3 stitches remaining before the marker. Alright, we've come to the end of row 11 here, so I've stopped with 3 stitches left before the marker. So this is the chain from a previous row, and then we have 1 little slip stitch here, and then 2 and 3. So I'm going to slip stitch into that 3rd stitch from the marker, and then I'm gonna chain 1 for row 12, where I want to keep my yarn toward the inside of the shoe again, and from here we're going to just do just like we did before. So I'm going to skip Here's my chain. I'm going to skip that slip stitch that we just worked and then work into what looks sort of like the third stitch from the hook. And there I'm going to do a slip stitch, and that's going to just continue that ankle taper. So we've got a slip stitch there, and we're going to single crochet in every stitch until 3 stitches before the marker on the right marked side. Alright, here we are over on the right marked side. So here's my marked stitch, and then we have 1, 2, 3 stitches here. So I'm going to slip stitch into the next stitch here. And then as I'm turning, I'm going to chain 1, and we have just the littlest bit left to work right here, and we're going to work back to the middle of the heel where all of this began. So I'm going to skip, here's my chain, I'm going to skip that first slip stitch into the next, single crochet there, and then I'm going to single crochet in each single crochet until the back of the heel. So this is where it's handy if you did mark the back of your heel, you know exactly that you've made it there by reaching your stitch marker. I just know what hole I started with, so I know I've passed that, and I'm going to just end with 1 slip stitch into the next single crochet just so that it tapers off nicely. And then I can cut my yarn here because we're going to reattach at the toe section. So just, you can leave this here, we're going to crochet over it in a few minutes, but first we'll work on the toe. Alright, so for the toe section, I've placed 2 stitch markers here, and they're right at about 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock. So they have 11 stitches in between. That's not counting the marked stitches. There's 11 stitches in between here, and I've tied my yarn into the left hand marked stitch. So it's attached right here, and because it's really hard to do later on, I'm just going to weave this end in right now. Okay, so now that we've gotten that tail woven in, I'm going to insert my hook in the marked stitch and just yarn over so that I have a loop here. And from here, I am going to be working my first double crochet into the 4th stitch from the marker. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and I'm going to double crochet into that stitch. So what we're creating, what we're creating are little clusters of 4 double crochet at a time, and that's going to create that top pattern on the slipper. So I've got 1 there, and I'm going to double crochet 3 more times into that same spot. So here's 2 and 4. So there's my first little cluster, and now I'm going to skip 3 stitches and work into the 4th stitch from where I'm at. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and right here I'm going to work another 4 double crochets into that stitch. Okay, so now we've gotten 2 little clusters of 4 double crochet, and I'm going to skip 3 more single crochets here, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to slip stitch into my marked stitch. So the markers just help us know that we're working right in the middle of the toe and help us keep track of where we're at as we get started here. So actually you can remove them now at any time unless they help you to kind of know where you started. So I slip stitched into my marked stitch, and then I actually need to slip stitch a few more up the edge here. So I'm going to remove this one. So we're going to have a total of 4 slip stitches over here. So here's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I've slip stitched 4, 1 to join it and 3 up the edge, and now I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to do the same thing again, but now instead of working into this row of single crochet, I'm going to be working into the middle of these clusters. So right in the middle of the 4 double crochets, we're going to put our cluster right here. So I'm going to yarn over, we're not chaining, we're just going straight into the double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, complete a double crochet right there, and then I'm going to do 3 more in that same spot. Okay, so I'm going to show you really closely where I'm working here. I've got 2 double crochets on this side and 2 on this side, and then there's kind of a hole in the middle, and that's where I'm putting my cluster of 4 more double crochets. And that creates a nice symmetrical design up the toe. And 4. Okay, now that we've completed our second cluster, it's kind of handy to have this marker here because we want to count up 3 stitches from where this last one was joined. So from here, we're going to count 1, 2, 3, and we are going to join our cluster into that 3rd stitch. So there should be 2 empty stitches in between where we joined last time and where we're joining this time. So I'm going to just slip stitch right here, and then again I'm going to slip stitch 3 up the side of the slipper for a total of 4 slip stitches. Okay, so I want you to just be able to get a really close look at what's going on here. We've got the first 2 clusters from that first row and the second 2 clusters here. And from here, we're going to work to create eventually a total of 4 clusters going across the top. Okay, so now to work row 3, we are going to yarn over and double crochet into what was the slip stitch we used to join in the previous row. So that's going to create the beginning of a new cluster for us. So I've got 1 double crochet there, and I'm going to put a second one in that same spot. And that's going to be kind of like half of a cluster that we'll finish off on the next row. So again, I'm going to now double crochet into the space that's in between the 4 double crochets from the previous row. So right in the middle there, I'm going to work 4 double crochets. There's the 4th, and then I'm going to do that same thing again in the next cluster. Work right into the middle of those double crochets with 4 more double crochet. And then we're going to end this row the same way we started it. So we're going to be working 2 double crochets into the slip stitch from row 3. So it's kind of along the edge here. It's a little bit hard to see, but I'm going to tuck my hook in there and double crochet once there and then twice. So now you can see we have basically 2 clusters and 2 half clusters, a half, a whole, and a half. And so I'm going to once again skip 2 stitches along this edge right here and then slip stitch into the 3rd one. So from here I'm going to slip stitch 3 more just like we have previously for a total of 4 slip stitches. For row 4, we are going to turn our work and then we're going to yarn over and we're going to work 4 double crochets into this gap between the edge of the slipper and the 2 double crochets we worked in row 3. So this is kind of like what would be the middle of a cluster right there. So I'm going to yarn over and work 4 double crochets right there, and then we will have a complete cluster for this row, and we'll end row 4 with 4 total clusters. So there's 1 total cluster now, and then I'm going to work 4 double crochets into the center in these 2 right here. And then again, we're going to end this row just kind of how we started it. So you can see we've got the 2 double crochets from row 3, and then there's that little gap before the edge. So we're going to work right here and put our 4 double crochets right into that gap. And then once again, we're going to skip 2 stitches along this edge and then slip stitch into the 3rd stitch, and then we'll work 3 more slip stitches up the edge. Okay, so if you take a look at your slipper now, you should have 4 total clusters going across. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to work 1 more row. It's going to be row 5, and we're just going to create 4 more clusters right in the middle of these clusters. So that means I'm going to yarn over, and then here we've got the center of the cluster right here in between those middle 2 double crochets. I'm going to place 4 double crochets, and then I'm going to do that exact thing 3 more times to finish up this row. I'm once again going to skip 2 stitches on this edge and slip stitch into the next stitch so that I've joined right here, and I should have 4 clusters across. And from here we're going to continue around, working a single crochet in every single stitch all the way around and back over the top here. And a couple things to note while you do this. One is that you're going to want to just crochet right over this tail, so hold it in and just kind of work over it, and then you won't have to weave it in at the end. And then also, as you work these edge pieces where the taper happens here, it's going to be a little clunky to see the stitches, so just do your best to work where you can and try to create something that looks as smooth as possible to sort of smooth out that gradual incline up to the heel. So let's work all the way around here, and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, and as I come to the end of this round here, I have worked a single crochet in each stitch all the way around, and now I'm going to just repeat that, but I'm just going to single crochet. The final round here is sort of like half of a round. We're going to single crochet in each stitch all the way around the heel and back, and stop right here, which is where we're going to fasten off. Okay, here we are at the end of this roundish row thing, and we are going to work our last stitch. Is just going to be a slip stitch into the top here section. We're not going to work across there, we're just going to slip stitch to end things in a smooth way. And I'm going to snip this yarn because we are done. So I am going to pull this through, and then all I have left to do is weave in this end, and then if you remember, this is the tail we worked over when we were doing the heel. I'm going to snip that off, so I will weave in this end, and then we'll be done. I hope you enjoyed making these flip-flop slippers. I love wearing mine, and I really hope you do too. I have a lot more free crochet patterns using flip-flops on my blog, makeandocrew.com, and I'd love for you to come over and check them out. Thanks for watching, and happy crocheting!